Hello, welcome to Mike's Nest Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Pashota. Happy Monday to you. So we're recapping the Mets-Giants series over the weekend. We had talked about the first game on Thursday, and I want to talk a little bit more about the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday games because I didn't have a chance to. So ultimately, the Mets split the series with the San Francisco Giants 2 games apiece. This was a series where the Mets honestly could have taken 3 and possibly even could have swept the entire series. I'm a little disappointed that they did not. Dropping back-to-back games to the San Francisco Giants, who are not a good team, is not something you really want to work in too much as your philosophy in these situations. You don't want to lose games to teams that are not going to be in. And the San Francisco Giants, as I said, not a good team. They're not going to be involved in the playoffs at any point. They have not done a very good job roster building. This team's basically full of ex-Mets. And it's a situation where they really needed to take these last 2 games. Not because they need momentum. They're going into a series at home against the Washington Nationals, a series that the Mets should take, and they should take, I would hope, all 3 games, but we have to see. The issue here with the Mets is how they've performed in situations where they have pitchers taking the mound who are supposed to be bigger parts of this team than not. And, let's say the Mets' depth right now is not fantastic. They are seemingly crippled by injuries to their entire starting pitching staff. They're basically the expectation that they were going to have of a pitching staff of Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, Jose Quintana, Kodai Senga, and Carlos Carrasco has all but been wiped out. We are left with only Kodai Senga at the moment, and Senga has not pitched particularly great. That Game 1 performance, he looked a little bit off in that one, and following it up with a performance against the Nationals, it'll be important to see how he actually will look in those games as well, because the last 2 games against the Athletics and Giants, he has not looked sharp. He is still adjusting to the Major League style, which we always have to tell ourselves that this is a completely different game for him. He is not accustomed to the style of pitching. He isn't accustomed to having a pitch clock on him. Of course, no one is, but he also has the added workload that he's not going to be accustomed to. He's going to have a different ball, different everything that he's facing, and different competition. And it's an adjustment period where he's looked good at other times, mediocre at best in other situations. At the moment, coming off that Game 1 performance, his ERA sits now at 4.29. I don't think really what the Mets were hoping for this early on in his run, but we'll be looking to see how he performs in his bounce back game against the Nationals. And so an important thing to watch for him coming forward. But let's talk about Saturday and Sunday, and talk a little bit about Friday also. The Friday saw the Mets shut out the Giants in their last win thus far. It was a 7-0 victory. Joey Lucchesi took the mound in a spot start. No one really knew what the expectation was going to be. They certainly were not expecting Lucchesi to dominate to the level that he did. He pitched 7 shutout innings, struck out 9, only allowed 4 base hits, and only allowed 2 walks. Now, again, this is against the Giants, who is, as aforementioned, not a good team, but it was a really good start. It was easily the best start of the season by any metric by a Mets starter, which is a little embarrassing, just in terms of what you would really be hoping for in terms of a pitching staff that has guys like Senga and Scherzer on your team. But the Mets starting pitching staff has not pitched particularly well early on in the year, and that's something to watch as they continue to adjust to this new system. The bullpen's done pretty well, and they had looked good in the so far in their performance. But let's talk about Saturday's performance, which was not good. David Peterson took the mound. It was Peterson's performance that really sunk them. Well, early on into the first inning, he allowed 4 runs, 3 of them coming off of a Brandon Crawford home run. And this has just been Peterson's MO. He has not looked sharp this entire season. He is probably the biggest setback in terms of expectations, because Peterson was pitched really well for the Mets last year. He was a consistent spot starter for the team. He stepped in when Max Scherzer was hurt. He stepped in when Jacob deGrom was hurt. He pitched in the bullpen. He basically did everything for the Mets last year, and he did it well. So the expectation was that Peterson was going to kind of continue that along and maybe shape that into a future starting spot where he might be able to take over Carlos Carrasco's role at some point during the year. It never really came to pass, and thus far early on this year, he has looked completely off balance. He struck out 8 batters, which is something encouraging to see. 8 strikeouts in 5 innings, nothing to sneeze at, but again, allows 7 earned runs, as I mentioned, 4 in the first inning, and the Mets were not able to come back from that. He allowed 2 more the next inning. And that was it, basically. Basically, they had no chance of coming back from that. While we saw the Mets, snag a couple of runs, Brandon Nimmo homered in that game as well. There was really nothing that I saw that looked particularly effective or good from the team. And basically, when the starter sinks them this early in a game, they just can't come back. The offense has not really shown themselves to be that kind of caliber of talent thus far, and again, they're not really playing with a full deck either, but this was a situation where they needed their starting pitcher to actually pitch like a starting pitcher, and to his credit, Pearson went out there and went the full 5 innings, even though he was getting shelled in the first 2 innings, but his performance has been the most lackluster thus far of any pitcher on the staff, with the exception of Carlos Carrasco, who's also been terrible. But Peterson, I was really looking forward to seeing more from him this year, and the fact that he has looked so sloppy, so off kilter, he's throwing a lot of pitches, can't seem to get anything over the plate, and when he does get over the plate, they're just tattooing him really over the field, all over the field. So his performance really stands out as probably the one that's going to get him demoted as soon as Justin Verlander comes back. A little bit more on Verlander coming up, but that was one major issue for the Mets that game. And then the following game, we saw Tyler McGill take the mound for the Mets, and McGill, with in contrast to David Peterson, has actually pitched remarkably well thus far. He actually looks like a guy who they could count on potentially, depending on how long Carrasco is going to be out. But he also was unusually sloppy in this game, allowed a lot of base hits. The Giants really should not be hitting the starters as much as they did, and McGill would ultimately only go 4 innings in the start yesterday. The Mets would ultimately lose that game 5-4. So it was a situation where he looked rough, I will say. He was not terrible, but you can see this was a little bit more like his opening day start, where he just was just didn't have the control, and it's been one of the major things with McGill is just a struggle to maintain his mechanics. He's adjusting to a lot of a major weight loss, and that's kind of throwing him off. So you can see him kind of rocking around. He's not really consistently hitting his release point on the mound, and everything's just a little bit off with him. And you wish McGill was a guy who was performing a little bit better, because I definitely think McGill has a lot of talent, but it's a matter of mentality and mechanics with him, and he's just not really consistent in that regard. So this leads to him pitching 1 good game, 1 bad game, and he may come back and pitch another good game next start, but you're left with a troubling start in this one. He only went 4 innings, allowed 6 hits, 4 earned runs, and had a pitch count of 81 going into the 5th inning, and then when Showalter took him out. A bright spot early on has been Jeff Brigham, and Jeff Brigham, the reliever, was brought in through his first 4 games thus far, all of them on this road trip. He's gone 4 innings. He struck out 7. He had to allow an earned run. He's been again, a very pleasant surprise. In this performance, he stepped in basically to be a spot starter, a long reliever in this one, and he went 2 shutout innings, struck out 4 batters. I mean, he did a great job, and then led it to Brooks Raley, in the middle of a nice comeback for it. After a rough start, he would also pitch an inning and struck out 3, and then gave it off to Drew Smith at the end. Smith would ultimately give up what was the game-winning run for the Giants after the Mets had tied the game in the 6th inning. Game tied 4-4, and then Mike Yastrzemski would double to deep center field and put them up 5-4, and they would hold on to maintain the save. So blow by the bullpen. Drew Smith, unfortunately, was the culprit in this case, and the Giants would win this game 5-4, ultimately splitting the series. Things to look at. Brandon Nimmo finally went 0 for 4 in the game after what was a blisteringly hot start or sort of stretch for Nimmo. He finishes his road trip now batting .350 on the year, 955 OPS. He's looked like one of the best players in Major League Baseball. Pete Alonso would also go 0 for 4 in this game, also signaling onto his hot stretch. So Alonso is going to be in the running for Player of the Month, I would assume, for the National League. Starling Marte would go 1 for 4, as would Francisco Lindor. And they're just kind of standing around and kind of doing everything. Jeff McNeil, good game for him as well. He's batting averages up to 296. So one of the bright spots of this game, and there weren't a lot. The Mets just kind of manufactured a lot of runs. The big shot was from Francisco Alvarez in the top of the 6th when he homered, and it was a barely clearing shot that just scraped the left field wall, but ultimately got over. It probably wouldn't have been a home run at Citi Field, but it worked out well for him. So I'm glad Alvarez on the board with his first home run of the season, and getting that done was an important thing. So the Mets finished up their 10-game road trip, went 7-3. Again, all three of these series were against opponents that were not in great shape. The Dodgers were deemed the toughest test, and the Dodgers are kind of scuffling right now. They're struggling to maintain a .500 record, and not really what you were expecting from the Dodgers this early on in the season. So to take 7-3 on this road trip, important certainly. Good to maintain their standings, and especially when they're in a tight race right now with the Braves. The Braves are in a rough stretch. They've dropped 4 in a row, and that's helped because the Mets don't lose any standing. They remain a half game behind Atlanta. And going into a series against the Nationals, as I mentioned before, it's important. They need to kind of right themselves, and they really need to take these series against the Nationals because, once again, these are series that they really need to win. They can't be screwing around. And, dropping the series, losing the series at all. Atlanta ran into Houston, who was on a terrific stretch, and now they'll have to take on Miami in a 4-game series before they meet up with the Mets at Citi Field at the end of the month. So big things coming up for the Mets. That'll be the big series thus far this year. That'll have a lot of eyes on it. A lot of people looking to see what team will establish dominance and potentially take over the division lead, or in Atlanta's case, they're hoping to extend their division lead. So we'll see how that goes. Important news was Justin Verlander has been deemed ready to go. He will make his final minor league rehab appearance this Friday, and then will make his first appearance this season next week against his old team, the Detroit Tigers. And they're looking at May 2nd or May 3rd for him to make his first start of the season. So, important to watch there. Verlander very much needed it back. The Mets are also expected to get Max Scherzer back that same week on May 1st, where he should be ready to pitch in that Atlanta series and pitch the final game in that Atlanta series at home. So, important to see there. And it's really, at this point, about maintaining their momentum going into the series against the Nationals. Mets get a much-needed off day, but we'll resume play tomorrow. Next start, they will face Josiah Gray after watching the Nationals, and coming back home after that series, and actually the entire road trip. Important to look at the guys who were such huge pieces of that: Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo and Jeff McNeil. All three guys were red hot throughout that entire road trip. Coming back home, keep maintaining it. I don't expect Brandon Nimmo to hit 350 on the year, but I would like him to display the same amount of energy and ripping base hits all over the ballpark. Good to see from him. Especially important for Jeff McNeil, who was in a tough stretch before going on the road to California. So I'm hoping he can kind of maintain this momentum coming into this home series against the Nationals and then eventually the Atlanta Braves. And then Pete Alonso, we just want to see him continue mashing. I mentioned in my last podcast, this is the best start for Pete Alonso in his entire career. He's never looked this good. He's looked absolutely terrific thus far. And Alonso as a early MVP candidate, it's got to be something that people are looking at as a surprising story. But if you're a Met fan, you're loving seeing Pete kind of step into this national stage and establishing himself once again as one of the National League's best home run and RBI guys, while also demonstrating a terrific approach at the plate. He's looked really good. His entire game is basically predicated on hitting home runs and coming up with clutch RBI singles, and the result of it is he has a great RBI count early on in the year. It looks like he could very well lead the league in RBIs once again this year, as long as the guys in front of him keep getting on base. And he keeps on hitting home runs. And I would hope Alonso is going to be one of the also likely candidates to be the home run champion. He hasn't won a home run title since his rookie year, so him winning another home run title, very good for him. And you got to hope that they are going to continue talks about keeping Pete in a Met uniform for the foreseeable future. His contract, he will be coming up soon at free agency, not this year, but very soon afterwards. So important for the Mets to discuss some type of long-term extension with Alonso. And the more he continues to play like this, the better the chances are that his eventual contract negotiations are going to look for him. I think he certainly deserves a lot of money, and seeing him play as well as he has early on this year makes it clear that it's well deserved in his case. I do think Alonso deserves to be a guy who could be a potential captain for the team. People look to him as a leader. He's a weird guy. I think his sense of humor is kind of strange, but he very well he demonstrates a really good approach to his sort of leadership style. I like everything that he does off the field as well as on the field, and it seems a cliche to say, but he's just a New York type of guy. It's a guy where a big personality like his can really can really form out and seem to to expand in this case. I really like the way he kind of conducts himself. There's no situations where he is causing them off-field controversy like a Matt Harvey would, but he's still well liked in the clubhouse by all accounts, and continues to play at a level that makes it pretty clear that he's going to be an all-star for the foreseeable future. So I don't see a situation where the Mets wouldn't try to keep him on the payroll for the next maybe 8-9 years maybe, and we'll see how long he actually ends up signing an extension for. Not to put the cart up before the horse, but I would like to see them extend him. So great things for Alonso. I've loved his start. He's really shown a tremendous growth at the plate, and the way he's been playing makes it clear to me that he's going to be a huge part of this team for this season. Thank you for listening to Mike's Mets podcast. Please be sure to follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Finally, please also follow the podcast Twitter, which is Mike's Mets Pod, all one word. Appreciate your time and have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. Let's go, Mets.